Can you even afford to eat here? My sister mocked. Then the waiter walked up smiling. Welcome back, Miss Dara. Will you be having your usual table? My dad nearly spat out his wine. This whole scene was 5 years in the making. 5 years since I'd walked away from the life my family had mapped out for me. They never understood my choices, writing off my dream of becoming a chef as something that was beneath our family's station. They had no idea that tonight, as they gathered at Maison, one of the most sought-after restaurants in the city, to celebrate my sister Heather's engagement, they were about to get a front row seat to just how much things had changed. My stomach was in knots as I smoothed down my simple black dress. Sometimes the hardest reservations to secure are the ones with your own past. Growing up in Greenwich, Connecticut, being a Mitchell came with a specific job description. We weren't just wealthy, we were a legacy. My parents, Margaret and Richard Mitchell, built their entire identities on the right kind of status symbols. The right neighborhood, the right schools, the right careers. Our sprawling colonial home was the stage for countless fundraisers where my mother would parade my siblings and me around like prized accessories. Her pride was directly tied to how perfectly we fit into her vision of success. The Mitchell children are destined for greatness, she'd announce to her friends at garden parties, my father nodding his silent approval from behind his whiskey glass. Heather is all set for Yale Law, and Ethan shows such incredible promise in mathematics. He'll be a brilliant investment banker. When their guests would inevitably turn to me, the middle child, my mother's smile would grow tight. And Dara has creative inclinations, she'd say. She'll find her way. What she really meant was that I was the family's disappointment. While Heather was winning debate tournaments and Ethan was acing math Olympiads, I was hiding out in the one place I felt at home, the kitchen. It was our housekeeper Elena's domain, and she was a warm, wonderful woman from Greece who saw something in me that my parents never could, a genuine passion. You have the hands for this work, she'd tell me as I helped her knead dough or carefully chop vegetables. The way you taste, the way you smell the herbs. You understand food in your soul. By the time I was 13, I was creating my own recipes. By 16, I was hosting secret dinner parties for my friends whenever my parents were out of town. The kitchen was my sanctuary, the one spot where I felt like I could truly be myself. When I tentatively brought up the idea of culinary school during my junior year of high school, my father didn't even look up from his newspaper. Cooking is servant's work, Dara. Mitchells hire chefs. They don't become them. Trying to keep the peace, I applied to business schools and ended up at Dartmouth, just like my father and grandfather. But even there, I found ways to feed my real passion. I took food science and nutrition classes, telling my parents they were complementary to a business degree. I started an underground supper club in my apartment, charging students for 5-course meals to pay for weekend workshops with local chefs. This double life continued straight through graduate school. I was 6 miserable months into an MBA program when Chef Laurent Pirot, a French master with 3 Michelin stars, came to campus for a lecture. He tasted some of my food at a university reception I'd helped cater and pulled me aside. "Who taught you to make a reduction like this?" he asked, his accent thick but his eyes deadly serious. "I taught myself," I admitted. "From books, videos, just experimenting." He handed me his card. "You are wasting your talent in this place. Come to my kitchen in New York. I will make you great." That conversation changed everything. 2 weeks later, I was standing in my parents' pristine living room, telling them I was dropping out of my MBA to go to culinary school. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. My father was the first to speak, his voice dangerously quiet. "This is unacceptable, Dara. We have invested everything in your education." "You've invested in the future you wanted for me," I countered. "You haven't invested a thing in what I actually want." My mother's face hardened into a mask. "If you pursue this hobby," she said, spitting the word, "you will do it without our support, financial or otherwise." Heather, home from her first year of law school, let out a cold laugh. "Always the rebel. Let's see how long you last cooking for minimum wage." Ethan, already working at a prestigious finance firm, just looked embarrassed for me. I walked out that night with nothing but my personal savings and a single suitcase. The next 5 years were the hardest of my life. I worked 18-hour days, lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, and took out loans for culinary school. But under Chef Laurent's demanding mentorship, I thrived. The intensity of the kitchen, the discipline, the creativity, it fed a part of my soul that business school had starved. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. An investor who had tasted my food at one of Laurent's events approached me with a business proposal. 2 years ago, Maison opened its doors with me as the executive chef and a part owner. 6 months after that, I bought out my partners. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using that business degree after all, just not in the way my parents had planned. Maison quickly became the hardest reservation to get in the city. Last month, Food and Wine magazine featured us in their Future of American Cuisine issue. Through it all, I kept my distance from my family. We had the occasional stiff phone call and exchanged holiday cards, but that was it. They knew I was doing something with food, but they had no idea about my actual success. I kept it that way on purpose. I wanted any recognition to be on my own terms, not as a way to finally win their approval. So when the embossed invitation to Heather's engagement dinner showed up at my apartment, I was shocked. The real surprise was the location. My own restaurant. Of course, they had no idea. They'd probably chosen it because it was exclusive and impressive, the perfect backdrop for showing off their status. After thinking about it for days, I decided to go. Not for their validation, but maybe to finally close a chapter in my life. 5 years of distance had given me perspective. I was secure enough in what I'd built to face them without crumbling under their judgment. What I didn't expect was how it would feel to sit there and listen to them criticize the very dishes I had poured my heart into creating. But that was exactly what was waiting for me as I pushed open the heavy glass doors of Maison that night, ready to play the part of the struggling black sheep one last time. The familiar scent of Maison wrapped around me as I stepped inside. Saffron, reduced wine, the subtle perfume of fresh herbs that I have delivered twice a day. Usually this smell centers me and reminds me of everything I've accomplished. Tonight, it just made me more anxious. I'd chosen my outfit carefully. A simple black Diane von Furstenberg dress, accessorized only with a single strand of my grandmother's pearls. It was understated elegance, but I knew my status-obsessed family would probably see it as me trying too hard with very little. My hair was pulled back into a sleek bun, another detail they'd likely read as not being able to afford a good stylist. Marcus, my most senior server, spotted me right away, his eyes widening in a silent question. I rarely came in through the front like a guest. I gave a tiny shake of my head and mouthed, "Not yet." He nodded discreetly and went back to work. I could see them from the entryway. They'd asked for the center table. My mother was in head-to-toe Chanel. My father was studying the wine list with exaggerated concentration. Heather was draped in what looked like a brand new Gucci outfit, seated next to a man I didn't recognize. Bradley, I assumed. He had slicked back hair and a watch that flashed every time he moved his wrist. Ethan and his wife Allison rounded out the group, both in business clothes as if they'd just come from the office. Celeste, my hostess, came over with a warm smile. "Good evening, miss." She caught herself just in time. "Your party is already seated. May I show you to the table?" "Thank you, Celeste," I said quietly, grateful for her quick thinking. As we approached, my mother noticed me. Her eyes did that quick head-to-toe scan I remembered from childhood, an assessment that calculated the approximate cost of my entire outfit and found it lacking. "Dara," she said, standing to give me 2 air kisses beside my cheeks. "You're finally here." We were starting to wonder. "I'm exactly on time, Mother," I replied, checking my watch. 7 o'clock right on the dot. My father stood up and gave me a stiff hug, ending with an awkward pat on the back. "You look healthy," he said. In our family, that was code for saying I hadn't maintained the rail-thin figure prized in our social circle. Heather barely bothered to stand, just offering her cheek for me to kiss. "This is Bradley," she announced as her fiancé stood and shook my hand. His grip was too firm, a power move I recognized from countless business meetings. "Bradley Harrington," he said. "Princeton undergrad, Wharton MBA. Just made junior partner at Goldman. No, nice to meet you, just his credentials." It was the Mitchell family's love language. Ethan's greeting felt a little more genuine, though his wife Allison's smile seemed tight. I found out later that she'd been the one tasked with booking this impressively exclusive restaurant, and she was nervous about whether it would meet my family's sky-high standards. "Well," my mother said as I took the last empty seat, "we've already ordered champagne. I hope that's all right." I saw they'd picked the most expensive bottle on the list. Showy, but not completely reckless. Typical. The restaurant hummed with the exact energy I'd worked so hard to create. The lighting was soft and intimate, but bright enough to show off the beautiful food. The sound level was perfect. You could have a conversation without shouting, but it still felt private. Every detail, from the weight of the linen to the custom-designed chairs, was my decision. I watched my staff's subtle reactions as they realized I was sitting with guests. Jose, our sommelier, caught my eye as he brought over the champagne. A slight raise of his eyebrow asked if he should acknowledge me. I gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of my head. "An excellent choice," he said to my father instead, presenting the bottle with smooth elegance before he started pouring. "We're celebrating an engagement," my father announced, clearly hoping for some special treatment. "Congratulations," Jose replied smoothly. "Maison is honored to host such a special occasion." "I'm surprised you managed to get a reservation," I said, playing innocent. "I've heard it's incredibly difficult." Bradley leaned forward. "I know people," he said with a wink, so smug I had to stop myself from rolling my eyes. "Called in a favor with a client who's friendly with the management." I bit my tongue. That client was probably Craig Winters, one of our regular investors who sometimes requested tables for his business contacts. I made a mental note to have a word with him about Bradley. "Well, aren't you resourceful?" I murmured, raising my glass. "To a perfect match and a brilliant future. A perfect match and a brilliant future," my father declared. We clinked glasses and I took a small sip, noting with satisfaction that the champagne was served at the precise temperature I'd trained my staff to maintain. "So," my mother began, setting down her glass and fixing her gaze on me, "tell us what you've been up to these past few years. You've been so mysterious." All eyes at the table turned to me. 5 pairs, all ready to judge. "I've been working in food," I said simply. "Learning, growing." "Still on that cooking kick?" Heather sighed as if I'd confessed to an embarrassing habit. "I thought for sure you'd have moved on to something more substantial by now." "Not everyone is cut out for the corporate path," Ethan added, somehow making his defense sound like another criticism. Bradley looked confused. "What is it you do exactly?" "Line cook, catering. I've worn a lot of hats," I answered vaguely. "Well, we're just glad you're managing to support yourself," my mother said with that fake graciousness I knew so well, though we've always said our door is open if things get too difficult. Just then, Jessica, one of our most experienced servers, came over with the amuse-bouche, a single, beautiful bite of compressed watermelon topped with fermented black garlic and a tiny green from a specialized urban farm. "Compliments of the kitchen," she said, carefully placing one in front of each of us. Her eyes met mine for a split second, a flash of loyalty, before she slipped back into professional mode. "Is this it?" Heather asked, looking at the single bite with disappointment. "I'm starving." "It's an amuse-bouche," I explained, a palate opener. "The meal hasn't really started yet." "I know what an amuse-bouche is, Dara," she snapped. "I'm not culturally illiterate just because I went to law school instead of playing with food." I watched as they all tasted my creation. My mother took the tiniest bite possible, always watching her calories. My father popped the whole thing in his mouth without even seeming to taste it. Ethan and Allison, at least, seemed to appreciate it. Bradley made a big show of analyzing the flavors, using terms that didn't make any culinary sense, and Heather left hers completely untouched. "I don't do raw garlic," she declared. Even though the black garlic wasn't raw at all, it had been fermented for 60 days in a carefully controlled environment, a process I'd perfected after 3 years of experimentation. As our server cleared the plates, I saw the quick flash of disappointment in her eyes when she noticed Heather's untouched food. In that moment, I felt protective, not of myself, but of my staff, who took so much pride in our work. I had built Maison to be more than a restaurant. It was a family, bound together by shared passion, not DNA. The evening was just getting started, but I could already feel the old dynamic settling in. I was the outsider, the one who'd chosen the wrong path, the one whose choices needed to be justified. But unlike the Dara of 5 years ago, I now had a secret strength, one that was about to turn this whole dinner on its head. So, tell us about the wedding plans, I said, deliberately steering the conversation back to Heather as the next course arrived. A beautiful arrangement of heirloom tomatoes, house-made ricotta, and basil oil that had taken me months to perfect. Heather immediately brightened up. We've booked St. Thomas Church, of course. The reception will be at the plaza for 400 guests, though Mother thinks we should cut it down to 350. The guest list is getting unwieldy. My mother cut in. The Astor Williams aren't speaking to the Bennetts since that unfortunate yacht incident, so we can't possibly seat them in the same section. I had to stop myself from smiling. The seriousness with which they discussed these social calculations never failed to amaze me. 400 people seems like a lot, I ventured, taking a bite of the tomato dish. Bradley leaned in. It's networking, not just a celebration. Half those invitations are relationship investments. Precisely, my father agreed. Bradley understands the social capital. A wedding of this caliber opens doors. And what about you, Dara? Heather asked, her tone suddenly sharp. Any prospects on your horizon, or are you still too busy with your cooking? I noticed she had barely touched her food, just pushing the beautiful heirloom tomatoes around her plate with clear disinterest. I'm focused on my career right now, I said simply. Career, Ethan repeated with a small laugh. Is that what we're calling it? My mother jumped in. Dara, dear, surely by 29 you're thinking about settling down? There's that lovely son of Margaret Whitley's. He's in hospital administration, I believe. Very stable. I'm not looking to be set up, Mother. Well, your options will only get more limited with each passing year, she pressed on, especially in your situation. Before I could respond, our server came to clear the plates. I'd been so tense I'd barely even tasted my own food. Is there a problem with the dish? Jessica asked Heather, noticing her nearly full plate. It was too acidic, Heather replied dismissively, and the tomatoes could have been riper. I bit my tongue. Those tomatoes had been picked at their absolute peak that very morning from a farm upstate that grew them specifically for us. I'm so sorry to hear that, Jessica said with practiced diplomacy. I'll be sure to let the kitchen know. The next course arrived. Seared scallops with a brown butter emulsion and pickled ramps, a spring special I was really proud of. Now, this looks promising, my father declared, cutting into a scallop with his fork. Bradley swirled his wine. A Sancerre I had personally chosen to go with this course. Decent wine list here, he announced. Not exceptional, but passable. Jose, who was walking by and overheard this, shot me a quick look. I gave him a subtle smile. Jose had been poached from a 3 Michelin star restaurant in Paris and had turned down job offers from all over the world to work with me. So, Dara, Allison began, clearly trying to include me. Ethan mentioned you're working in food, but you never really said what you actually do. Before I could answer, Heather cut me off. She's probably hostessing somewhere, right, Dara? Using that business degree to seat people and hand out menus. Actually, I started. No shame in that, my father interrupted. Everyone has to start somewhere. Though after 5 years, I would have expected a little more advancement. I've advanced, I said quietly. Into what? Assistant manager at an Applebee's? Heather laughed at her own joke. Heather? Ethan warned, showing a rare moment of defense. What? She said. I'm just being realistic. She chose to walk away from her education for this passion project. Actions have consequences. I took a sip of my wine, letting the familiar flavors center me. And how is law treating you, Heather? Still at Henderson and Block? Her expression tightened. I'm between positions at the moment. Actually, taking some time to plan the wedding. She was working too many hours. Bradley interjected. I told her my wife doesn't need to kill herself at some firm. Once we're married, she can do charity work like my mother. I saw a flash of something. Resentment? Frustration? In Heather's eyes before her face went back to looking placid and agreeable. The next course arrived. Hand-rolled tagliatelle with spring peas, pancetta, and mint. It was one of our signature dishes. The one that had been featured in Food and Wine. The portion size here is ridiculous, my mother commented, looking at the beautifully plated pasta. All this money for 3 bites. It's about quality over quantity, Mother, I replied. The tasting menu is designed to take you through multiple flavors and textures. In my day, restaurants gave you a proper meal for your money, my father grumbled. This cuisine nonsense is just a way to charge more for less food. I watched as Bradley cut into his pasta instead of twirling it, breaking the delicate strands I had rolled by hand that morning. So, how exactly are you affording a place like this on a food service salary? Heather asked, not even trying to be subtle. This is one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. I felt all their eyes on me again. I manage my finances carefully, I said. Oh, please, Heather scoffed. A dinner here probably costs more than you make in a day. Who are you dating? Is he paying for this? I'm not dating anyone, I said evenly. Then how can you possibly afford this? She pressed. Are you in debt? Maxing out credit cards to keep up appearances? Heather? Ethan warned again, looking uncomfortable. No, I want to know, she insisted. We all rearranged our schedules for this dinner that she suggested, at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Either she's being financially irresponsible, or she's not being honest with us. The next course arrived, a perfectly cooked duck breast with cherry gastrique and farro. Chef Miranda, who ran the kitchen when I wasn't there, had cooked it flawlessly. This duck is undercooked, Bradley announced after one bite. I looked at his plate. The duck was a perfect medium rare, exactly as it should be. It's meant to be served that way, I explained. Medium rare is the ideal temperature for duck breast. I prefer my meat well done, he declared, waving for a server. When Jessica came over, he didn't even look at her. This is raw. Take it back and have them cook it properly. I saw the flash of annoyance in Jessica's eyes, quickly covered by professional courtesy. Of course, sir. My apologies. As she took his plate, I caught her eye and gave a slight nod. She'd know to have the kitchen cook a new duck breast. not ruin the existing one by overcooking it. Really, Dara? My mother said once Jessica had left. You still haven't answered Heather's question. How are you paying for this dinner? The tension at the table was thick now. I could feel that old, familiar tightness in my chest. The same feeling I'd had at countless family dinners growing up. The feeling of being cornered, judged, and found lacking before I'd even had a chance to speak. But I wasn't that insecure young woman anymore. I had built something I was truly proud of. Something that was completely mine. For a second, I thought about telling them everything right then, watching their faces change as they realized whose restaurant they were in, whose food they'd been criticizing so carelessly. But before I could decide, Bradley's overcooked duck returned, now dry and tough, all its tenderness and complexity gone. Much better, he declared after one bite, even though I could see from across the table that it was ruined. My father signaled for the wine list again. Let's order another bottle. Something more impressive this time. When Jose came over with the leather-bound list, my father made a big show of looking through it, finally pointing to one of our most expensive bottles, a Bordeaux that cost over $800. This one should be adequate, he declared. I knew that bottle well. I'd chosen it myself during a trip to France last year, after meeting with the winemaker personally. It was spectacular, but completely wrong for the dishes we were eating. May I suggest something that might pair better with the rest of the meal? I ventured. My father waved me off. I think I know my wines, Dara. Jose caught my eye, silently asking for direction. I gave him a small nod. Let my father have his way. This wasn't the battle to fight. As the evening went on, through the last savory course and into dessert, a deconstructed lemon tart that was one of my personal favorites, the little jabs kept coming. Every dish was met with some criticism. Every time I tried to join the conversation, it was somehow twisted into more evidence of my failure. By the time coffee was served, I felt completely drained. It was exhausting, enduring my family's condescension while watching them carelessly critique my life's work. Then came the moment I'd been both dreading and waiting for, the check. Marcus came over with a black leather folder holding the bill, placing it discreetly in the middle of the table. My father reached for it immediately, a reflex of patriarchal duty, but Bradley intercepted. Please, Richard, allow me, he said with a smoothness that felt practiced, as if he'd turned even generosity into a power move. Consider it my treat to celebrate the occasion. My father put up the expected token protest before giving in. I watched as Bradley opened the folder, his confident smile fading into barely concealed shock as he saw the total. Is there a problem? My father asked, noticing the change. No, Bradley said, quickly recovering. Just confirming the math. I knew exactly what he was looking at. A dinner for 7, with premium wine pairings, special off-menu requests, and that $800 Bordeaux would easily be over $3,000. Not outrageous for a restaurant of Maison's caliber, but definitely a statement. He reached for his wallet and pulled out a black credit card with deliberate slowness, making sure everyone noticed how exclusive it was. Heather, maybe sensing his discomfort, chose that moment to return to her favorite topic. So, Dara, she said, her voice sickly sweet, you never did say how you're managing to contribute to this extravagant dinner. We wouldn't want you stretching yourself financially on our account. All eyes were on me again. I could feel the old dynamic locking into place. Heather, the success. Me, the disappointment. I can cover my portion, I said simply. Can you, though? She pressed, leaning forward. Because we all know what food service jobs pay. Can you even afford this place? The table went completely silent. The question hung in the air, so deliberately insulting that even my parents looked uncomfortable. Heather, my mother murmured. Perhaps this isn't— No, I want to know, Heather insisted, her eyes locked on mine. We've spent the whole night pretending that everything's fine, that Dara's choice to throw away her education hasn't left her struggling. I think we deserve some honesty. I felt a hot flush spread from my chest to my face. 5 years of distance, of building my own life and my own success, and nothing had changed. I was still the family disappointment, still being asked to justify my existence. Bradley, maybe seeing a chance to regain some control after the shock of the bill, joined in. If you need help with your part, just say so. There's no shame in it. I don't need help, I said, my voice tight. Then how exactly are you paying for this? Heather demanded. Because a meal here probably costs more than you make in a week. I opened my mouth to answer, to finally tell them everything, when Bradley suddenly frowned at the bill. Wait, there's a mistake here, he announced. They've only charged us for the wine, not the food. He signaled sharply for Marcus. Excuse me? There's an error on our check. Marcus came over to our table with perfect timing, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. In reality, he probably had been. My staff knew me well enough to be watching this whole drama play out. Is there a problem, sir? He asked. Yes? You've only charged us for the drinks, not the meal, Bradley said, pointing at the bill. Marcus looked at the check, then at me, his expression questioning. In that moment, I made my decision. The charade was over. I gave Marcus a slight nod. There's no error, sir, Marcus said smoothly. The dinner portion has been taken care of. By whom? My father asked, frowning. Marcus turned to me, his professional demeanor softening into a warm smile. Welcome back, Miss Dara. Your usual table is ready for your meeting with the investors. Would you like me to handle the situation? The silence that fell over the table was absolute. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me, filled with confusion and disbelief. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my voice steady even though adrenaline was rushing through me. Yes, please close out Mr. Harrington's beverage tab. The rest is on the house, as usual. Very good, Miss Dara, he replied, taking the folder from Bradley's now slack grip. Chef Miranda mentioned she'd like your opinion on the new spring menu items when you have a moment. I'll stop by the kitchen before my meeting, I told him. As Marcus walked away, I finally looked directly at my family. Their faces showed a mix of confusion, shock, and the slow dawning of understanding. What? My mother finally managed. What is happening? I took a deep breath. The moment I had both dreaded and secretly waited for had arrived. Welcome to Maison, I said simply. My restaurant. The silence felt like it lasted forever. My father was the first to recover, his expression shifting from confusion to calculation. Your restaurant? He repeated carefully. You work here? No, father, I clarified, feeling a strange calm settle over me. I own Maison. I'm the executive chef and sole proprietor. That's impossible, Heather blurted out. This is one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. It's been featured in all the major magazines. Yes, I agreed. Food and Wine last month. Bon appetit before that. The New York Times gave us 4 stars last year. Bradley was staring at me like I'd just started speaking in another language. But you said you worked in food? You were so vague about everything. Because I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was struggling, I explained. And you've all made that perfectly clear tonight. My mother's hand fluttered up to her pearls, her go-to move whenever she felt socially destabilized. Darling, why wouldn't you tell us about this? Achievement? The way she said achievement said it all. Success had made my choices acceptable to her in a way that passion alone never could. Would you like the full story? I asked, looking around the table. Without waiting for an answer, I continued. After I left 5 years ago, I moved to the city with the little savings I had. I rented a tiny room in an apartment in Queens with 3 roommates. For a year, I worked 3 jobs. Prep cook at a bistro from 5 a.m. to noon, line cook at a midtown restaurant from 1 to 10 p.m., and weekend shifts at a bakery. I took a sip of water, noting their uncomfortable expressions. I slept 4 hours a night. My arms were covered in blisters and burns. I studied technique obsessively in my few free moments. Chef Laurent, who had first encouraged me, took me under his wing. I became his sous chef in 18 months. Ethan was watching me with what looked like genuine interest. Allison seemed impressed. My parents looked frozen, like they were still processing. Heather's face was unreadable. 2.5 years ago, I was working a private event at Laurent's restaurant. A guest, James Warren from Warren Capital, tried a special course I'd made and asked to meet the chef. He was surprised to find someone so young had created what he called the most innovative dish he'd tasted in years. I gestured around us. James became my investor. We found this space. It was a failed nightclub back then. I developed the concept, designed the menu, hired the staff. I oversaw every single detail, from the light fixtures to the custom plates. But the cost, my father said, his mind seemingly stuck on the money. A restaurant of this quality, in this location, it must have required millions. $3.4 million for the initial investment, I confirmed. James brought in 2 other investors. We opened to great reviews, partly thanks to Laurent's endorsement. 6 months in, we were profitable. 3 months after that, I used the restaurant's success to get a loan and buy out my investors. I've been the sole owner for over a year now. That's why you suggested we meet here. Heather realized, her voice small. You knew all along. Actually, no, I corrected her. Allison chose this restaurant. Isn't that right, Allison? Everyone turned to look at Ethan's wife, who blushed deeply. I had no idea, Dara. The concierge at Ethan's firm recommended it as the most impressive new restaurant in the city. I swear I didn't know it was yours. Of course you didn't, I assured her. No one in the family knew. I made sure of that. But why keep it a secret? My mother pressed. We're your family. We would have been proud. I couldn't stop a sharp laugh from escaping. Would you? The same family who called cooking servants' work? Who cut me off completely when I chose culinary school? Who, just minutes ago, were making snide comments about my life choices? My father cleared his throat. Now, Dar, that's unfair. We were concerned about your stability. Your future. If we'd known you had this kind of business sense, my mother began. That's exactly my point, I interrupted. You couldn't respect my passion on its own. It only has value to you now because it comes with success and status. Just then, Chef Miranda came over to our table in her crisp white chef's jacket. Chef de cuisine Miranda Torres embroidered on the breast. She made an impressive figure. Sorry to interrupt, Dara, she said, but the Matsuhisa party is here for their tasting, and Savor wants to confirm your interview for next week's feature. Also, your publisher called about the cookbook cover design. I nodded. Thank you, Miranda. Please tell them I'll be there shortly. As Miranda walked away, I saw the growing amazement on my family's faces. Cookbook? Heather echoed. It's coming out this fall with Knopf, I confirmed. 120 recipes with some personal stories. Dara, my mother began, her voice taking on that coaxing tone she uses when she's trying to manage a difficult social situation. This is all so impressive. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We could have helped. Supported you. The way you supported me when I needed it most? I asked quietly. By cutting me off completely? We thought it was a phase, my father protested. How were we to know you had this entrepreneurial spirit? You've clearly inherited my business sense. I felt a flash of anger at his attempt to take credit for my success. I built this myself, I said firmly. Without your connections, your money, or your support. Bradley, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly perked up. A cookbook deal. That must come with a significant advance. And this place, he said, gesturing around appreciatively, his earlier criticisms forgotten. It must generate serious revenue. Do you have expansion plans? Maybe a restaurant group? I have some contacts in hospitality investment who might be interested. I couldn't help but laugh at how transparent he was, pivoting so quickly from condescension to networking. I'm doing just fine with my current advisors, but thank you, I said. Heather shot him an irritated look before turning back to me. So all this time, while we thought you were struggling, you were actually succeeding. Building all of this? Yes, I said simply. And tonight, she continued, her voice hardening, you let us sit here, criticizing your food, your wine list, your portion sizes, all while knowing it was yours. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I was still the family failure, I explained. And now I know. That seems manipulative, she snapped, though I could see the embarrassment behind her anger. More manipulative than asking how I could afford to eat here, than suggesting I must be in debt or dating someone wealthy to pay for my meal, I countered. You weren't concerned about me, Heather. You were enjoying what you thought was your superiority. The restaurant had mostly emptied out as we'd been talking, the evening service winding down. Jose came over with a bottle. Your special reserve cognac, Miss Dara, he said, for your investors meeting. And Chef Miranda says the kitchen is ready whenever you are. Thank you, Jose, I replied. Please let Miranda know I'll be there in 10 minutes. As he left, I turned back to my stunned family. I have a business to run, I said, standing up. Thank you for coming tonight. Dara, wait, my mother said quickly. Don't leave like this. We should celebrate your success. Maybe we could all have brunch this weekend. Catch up properly. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the intimidating figure from my childhood, just a woman trying to salvage her pride and her position. I'll think about it, I said. But right now, I have investors waiting and a kitchen to run. As I turned to leave, Ethan stood up. Dara, he said, his voice quieter than the others. For what it's worth, this is incredible. What you've built here is remarkable. I'm sorry I didn't support you sooner. Of all their reactions, his felt the most genuine. I gave him a small nod before walking away from the table, where I had just changed my family's dynamics forever. I had only taken a few steps when I heard the quick click of heels behind me. I turned to find my mother hurrying to catch up, her perfectly composed facade starting to crack. Dara, please, she said, lowering her voice. You can't just drop a bombshell like that and walk away. We need to talk about this. I glanced toward the private dining room where my actual investors, a group discussing funding for my next restaurant concept, were waiting. I have a meeting, Mother. Postpone it, she insisted. This is family. Family hasn't been a priority for you for 5 years, I replied, keeping my voice steady. My business commitments don't suddenly become optional because you've decided my career is worthy of your attention. The rest of the family had followed her, creating an awkward little cluster near the bar. My father looked distinctly uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being out of control of a situation. Heather's expression wavered between resentment and what might have been a shred of respect. Perhaps we could continue this conversation tomorrow, my father suggested in his problem-solving business tone. Dinner at our place. We have a lot to discuss, including how we might help you expand, Bradley added eagerly. My firm specializes in— I don't need your help, I interrupted firmly. I didn't build this place to finally win your approval. I built it because this is what I love, what I'm good at. The fact that it's successful doesn't suddenly make my passion more valid than it was 5 years ago. No one is saying that, darling. My mother backpedaled. We're simply proud of what you've accomplished. Are you proud, Mother? I asked. Or are you just relieved that my choices don't embarrass you socially anymore? Her flinch told me I'd hit a nerve. That's unfair, my father interjected. We've always wanted what was best for you. No, I corrected him. You wanted what aligned with your vision for me. There's a difference. Miranda appeared at my side, her presence a welcome support. The Halford group is asking if you'll be joining them soon, she said quietly. 5 minutes, I promised her. As Miranda nodded and stepped away, I turned back to my family. I need to go. Heather stepped forward, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I owe you an apology. The things I said tonight were unkind. They were honest, I replied. That's the one good thing about this evening. I got to see exactly how you all view me when you think I'm not successful. That's not fair, Ethan said, joining the conversation. People make judgments based on the information they have. We didn't know. You didn't know I was successful, I clarified. But you did know I was pursuing something I loved. That should have been enough for my family to show me basic respect. A heavy silence fell over the group. You're right, my father finally said, surprising me. We should have supported your passion, regardless of the outcome. Coming from him, this admission was huge. Richard Mitchell did not acknowledge his mistakes easily. Where do we go from here? My mother asked, genuine uncertainty in her voice. Another rarity. I took a deep breath thinking about it. Despite everything, these people were my family. The hurt was real, but so was our shared history. Cutting them off completely had never been my goal. I just needed enough distance to build my own life without their judgment clouding every decision. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But tonight made one thing clear. If we're going to have a relationship moving forward, it has to be on different terms. I'm not the family failure looking for redemption. I'm a successful chef and business owner who deserves the same respect you'd give any other professional. Of course, my father agreed quickly. And that means no more comments about my life choices, no more unsolicited career advice, and absolutely no attempts to network through my restaurant, I added, looking pointedly at Bradley, who had the decency to look embarrassed. About Heather's wedding, my mother began tentatively. What about it? I asked. We'd still like you to be there, Heather said, her voice softer than before. As my sister, not as whatever we thought you were before tonight. I looked at her, trying to see past the years of competition and judgment. Despite everything, there had been good times too. Secrets shared when we were kids, supporting each other through heartbreaks. Inside jokes that no one else understood. I'll be there, I promised. Then, after a moment's thought, I added, and if you'd like, I could host a dinner for the wedding party here at Maison. As my gift, Heather's eyes widened. You would do that? After how we've treated you? You're still my sister, I said simply. But to be clear, this isn't me seeking your approval. It's me offering something I'm proud of, on my own terms. I understand, she said quietly. And I would be honored. A real smile, the first of the night, passed between us. Now I really do have to go, I said, gesturing toward the private dining room. Of course, my father nodded. Your business comes first. Not always, I corrected him. But tonight, yes. As they gathered their things to leave, I added, I'm free for brunch on Sunday. Not at your club, though. There's a small place in the East Village I think you should try. We'll be there, my mother promised, looking relieved at this small opening. I watched them file out of the restaurant. Their perspectives forever changed. As the door closed behind them, I let out a long breath, feeling strangely lighter. Miranda came over again. Everything okay? Getting there, I replied. Family is complicated? Tell me about it, she laughed. My mother still introduces me as her daughter, who works at a restaurant, like I'm a teenage waitress at a diner. I smiled, grateful for her understanding. Let's go talk about the spring menu. I have some new ideas I'm excited about. As we walked toward the kitchen, my sanctuary, my achievement, my true home, I realized that the most important revelation of the night wasn't showing my family what I'd built. It was finally, fully recognizing it myself. I had created this success on my own terms, without their approval, and that knowledge was worth more than any validation they could ever offer.